6 a.m., March 13th, 2001. Elliot's, come on. You're grabbing at straws on this one. It's creepy. It's coincidental. But there's no way the case and the game are connected. Detective Elliot sat and listened as his partner, Detective Dave Matthews, relentlessly tried to pick apart his latest theory in the case of the drowning children. He held a cup of coffee in his hand and stared out the diner's window into the streets that were being lightly covered in a spring rain. Hey man, are you even listening to me? Elliot looked away from the window at his partner. I think you're wrong, Dave. Just because we haven't seen anything like this before doesn't mean it can't happen. So what, a Nintendo game is circulating through the neighborhood and killing children as they play? Even if that were possible, what, and I can't believe I'm even justifying this as a question, would a game be angry about? Elliot rolled his eyes and took another long sip of his coffee. The night before had been long and, not surprisingly, unending. After the discovery of the strange gray cartridge, Elliot spent every moment he could compiling information on the mysterious child known as Ben. From what he'd gathered, Ben was a normal child who had an interest in video games and spent most of his free time playing them. His drowning was a shock, especially to Elliot as he himself went over the file. The death was ruled as unsuspicious, but Elliot thought otherwise. Hey, Will, maybe this cartridge is an incarnation of your wife. Elliot lowered his cup and raised his eyebrow at his partner. Yeah, man, think about it. It's like a crazy effigy to her. The game cartridge represents her, and you are the player. The Nintendo represents your life. Games represent all the activities you do and must keep track of, and she is your favorite game to play. But she can't always be your center of attention. Other games, or in your case, mountains of casework, must sometimes take over game time or family time. Elliot leaned back and placed a hand on his forehead, slightly covering his eyes and yawning deeply. Too far, Dave. Too far. Come on, buddy. I'm just trying to get you off this crazy idea that some piece of plastic is harming people. Elliot didn't respond. He was done trying to explain his case and figured that resorting to silence was probably his best option. Okay, look. If you're not going to let it go, can you at least explain to me what your angle on this is? Elliot lowered his head and gave Detective Dave an unenthused look. I'm serious, man. Look, I'm your partner. I deserve to know what you're thinking here. Elliot agreed with his argument. He'd always been a stickler for transparency, especially when it involved casework and other work-related issues. He reached down into his briefcase beside him in the booth. He pulled out a large, multi-compartmentalized brown folder. He proceeded to look inside and take out several pieces of paper. The first picture is something I got off of Google. You have no idea how hard it was working with computers that are still running Windows 96. I wanted to start at the very beginning, so I just did a search on Majora. Turns out, it's short for Majoras Mask, the new Zelda game that came out last October. Not surprising though, I learned that hidden fact when I turned on the game last night. What's actually a bit shocking though, as you can see by this picture, Elliot laid a picture of what looked like a compilation of many different cartridges, all colored gold, on the table in front of his partner. All of the cartridges I could find were gold. Australia got a gray cartridge of the game, but it's senseless to imagine that a kid would want to wait an extra month to purchase a foreign game. It's even more senseless to think that their parents would go along with it, so I'm fairly sure this is an American cartridge. Why it's gray, I have no idea. Detective Matthews picked up a collage of golden cartridges and looked it over. Elliot could tell he wasn't yet convinced. His suspicions were proven true when Dave spoke next. So, maybe it's a special edition of the game or something. Or hell, a bootleg. There's a big market for bootleggers. I mean, damn, Will, did you see how poorly written the title was? If you're gonna bootleg, have some pride for God's sake. Elliot shrugged. It wasn't a bad argument, but he wasn't done yet. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another piece of paper. This time, it was a statement from the child's mother. It had been obtained by Child Services after the investigation found that the death was unsuspicious. But this is where Elliot was going to make his case. Here, let me read you a brief portion of this statement from Ben's mother during her interview with Child Protective Services, and you tell me if it sounds a little loose-ended. Ben was always a good boy. He sat in his room most days. He loved video games. They made him feel like he was achieving something. He didn't have many friends. Most days, you couldn't even get him out of his room. He was so busy playing games. I'd encourage him to go out with some of the neighbors' children, but he was so shy. He never went. When I found him, dead in our swimming pool, I just figured he'd been swimming with some of the children from the neighborhood, but something had gone terribly wrong, and they just left him here since they didn't know what to do. Did you catch it? Dave shook his head no. Did I catch what exactly? That sounds pretty straightforward if you ask me. What's there to be suspicious about? Okay, so you're telling me that after that entire explanation of how introverted her son was, that we're expected to believe that he accidentally drowned at a pool party with all of the neighborhood kids? Dave looked genuinely disturbed. You must be kidding me, Will. You're talking about a mother who just buried her child. It's a tragedy. Who knows what exactly was going on in her mind? What are you even suggesting? Elliot tilted his head and shrugged conspicuously. No, there's no damn way she drowned her son. He was all she had. Did you read any more of the file? Did you read the part about her husband leaving her? He was all she had left. Why would anyone even consider doing such a horrible thing? Elliot quickly grabbed the 2 pieces of paper off the table as the server approached. Coffee, gentlemen? Elliot's, with the hand that wasn't hiding extremely classified information, held out his coffee cup. Yes, thank you. He'll have some more too. Dave looked at Elliot's with an annoyed look, and then looked down and took a look at his watch. Cream and sugar? No, thank you. Black is good. The server then left the table and moved on. Dave looked down at his full cup of coffee, and then back at Elliot's. You do know we have to pay for refills, right? Plus, have you checked the time? We gotta get back to work soon. We can't sit here all morning and play cop drama. We're due at the office at 7. Elliot's perked up. Oh, good. Forensics will be done by the box by then, and then we can officially check it out without fear of being arrested. Dave groaned and looked at his watch again. Do you have anything else, or can I please be excused to go take a piss? All this damn coffee you keep ordering for me, which I'm not paying for, by the way, is going right through me. Elliot looked down into his briefcase one last time. He had plenty of papers, but he knew this was his last chance to make some sort of lasting impression. Then he found it. One last thing, and I promise this is it for now. Dave breathed out, annoyed, and crossed his arm. Fine, but is this real evidence or just more coincidental thoughts? This doesn't have anything to do with the cartridge at all. I did some research on pools in the neighborhood that Ben lived in. I didn't originally start there, but when I saw photographs of the house, more specifically the yard and their swimming pool, I had to do some digging. Elliot pulled out another picture, this time of a pool with a child's body at the bottom. He slid it to Dave, who instantly recoiled. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Will, this is fuck! David Matthews stopped before he filled the diner with obscenities, looking around to make sure he'd not drawn any attention. What the hell are you trying to prove here? Look, I know it's disturbing, but do you think I'd show you something this intentionally disgusting to screw with your head? I'm beginning to wonder, honestly, what the hell am I supposed to be seeing here? Elliot looked around to make sure that nobody was standing near them and then pointed at the photograph. More specifically, he pointed at one of the sides of the pool. It had a depth marker indicating that the body was at the 4.5-foot level. Ben was 12, right? Well, most 12-year-olds I know are taller than 54 inches tall. Hell, that's what my 8-year-old is. Now, he's considered tall for his age, but still, even if the kid couldn't swim, he would have had a hard time not being able to get to shallower water, right? Son of a bitch. I'd never considered that. Dave looked at the picture and squinted. He cursed under his breath. But what does that have to do with the drowning of those 16, as of early this morning, children? Even if Ben's mother offed him, that still doesn't explain them, although it does beg the question of whether or not she should be investigated. I'm not sure what the two have in common yet, but after this, you can't tell me that honestly there's a 0% chance of them being related. We have a self-aware game cartridge, a mother story that adds up less and less upon further investigation, 16 mysterious drownings of young children, all around the same age as Ben, and to top it all off, the cartridge isn't even at Ben's house. Which begs the question, who brought it to these children? It was nobody, apparently. Dave held his chin in between his thumb and index finger as he thought. Or maybe someone who knew Ben, maybe one of his friends who just couldn't let his buddy go, felt like he needed to face it somehow. Maybe he put that on the game. Maybe Ben's mother gave it to one of Ben's friends, who then donated it. Dave, what friends? Detective Matthews' eyes opened wide at this revelation. All of his arguments were cornered, and his friend had definitely done some potent work on this case. He reached into his pocket for his cell phone. Well, if we're considering this woman for murder, we'd better call it in. Elliot nearly jumped over the table as he heard this. Will, what the hell? Shh! No, we can't call it in. How do we explain that we came to this conclusion unless we admit to breaking into confidential evidence? Dave closed his flip phone and placed it back in his shirt pocket. Good call. Damn, that was close. What should we do? We check out the evidence like we normally would. Then we hold it for a few days like we're just being thorough. When we turn it back in, we simply tell the chief that one of the file's names was Ben, and it inspired us to reopen the case. From there, we can just explain the conclusion we came to. Detective Matthews nodded and pulled his wallet out to pay for breakfast. For this one, I think I'll pick up the coffee tab after all. If you just unlocked a key to a murder case, I'll buy you coffee all year. Elliot nodded to his partner and placed all the documents back into his briefcase. After exiting the diner and hailing a taxi, the two partners sat in silence as they arrived at work. The two dared not speak with such delicate information on their lips. Once they arrived inside, they were briefed on the latest drowning, and after acting as surprised as they could, promptly assigned the box of evidence out to themselves. The day went by slowly for Elliot as he waited in anguish for the next couple of days to pass. He was so sure that he'd found his lead that he could barely sit still. When the workday had ended, he took the box home and promptly entered his home office. Neither his wife nor son were home yet, so he took the opportunity to use the living room TV for his next task, exploring the mysterious cartridge. Elliot didn't bother plugging in the Nintendo that came in the box. His son's was already plugged in, and he figured that it wouldn't make a difference. He sat down the box beside him on the couch and slowly lifted the lid. As soon as he looked down into it, he saw what he was looking for. The cartridge was laying, face up on top of everything. The crude title, Majora, stared at him, menacingly. He felt a chill crawl up his spine as he retrieved it and placed it in the Nintendo 64 console. Before he booted it up, he decided to grab a notepad just in case something seemed worthy of writing down. But since it was a game, he figured he'd turn it on for 5 minutes and find nothing but frustration. Nevertheless, he sat the pad down beside him, reached down to flip the power switch on the console. He turned on the console. He watched the Nintendo 64 logo pop up and spin around slowly. Then, a strange mask came into the foreground as a wind-like sound effect played. It was quite creepy. Elliot pressed the start button, and it went to the title screen. More chills assaulted him as he looked at the screaming names of the two files. He decided to select the second file named Drowned. He didn't feel right selecting the one with a proper name. The screen went black for a second, and the music stopped. Elliot waited a few seconds and began pressing buttons. Nothing happened. He figured the game had frozen. Bootlegs were like that, so maybe Dave was right. He knelt down to hit the reset button when he heard a sound effect. A small message flashed across the middle of the screen. You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you? Elliot squinted in confusion at this title. Was the game starting? He continued to press buttons, but nothing changed. He decided to hit the reset button after all. When the game reset, he was greeted with the same title sequence as last time. He pressed start and was taken to the file screen again. Once more, he clicked on the file entitled Drowned, and again the screen went black. He pressed buttons again, but nothing happened. He was beginning to get frustrated when he heard the same sound effect as before, followed by the same message on the screen. You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you? Elliot shook his head in anger as he reached down and pressed the reset button again. After the same title screen, he reached the file screen. This time he didn't care which name he selected. He just wanted something different. He quickly selected the first name, Ben. He was immediately treated to different results. When the game began, Elliot's character, Link, was in what looked like a field with a large tree stump tunnel just ahead of him. Elliot had played the Zelda games back when he was a child briefly in the 80s, so he somewhat knew who Link was. He awkwardly moved his hands around the controller as he watched his on-screen character respond. He got a feel for the buttons and even hacked away at a couple of green slime creatures and some grass nearby. As he ran along, he noticed something strange in the distance. It looked like 3 people standing near a building with a giant telescope coming out of it. As Elliot moved his character toward the 3 bodies, the game's music stopped. As he got closer, Elliot saw 3 very strange people standing in front of him. One was a strange little man, who had a massive pack on his shoulders full of what he thought to be masks. The second was a little woodland creature wearing a hat and a mask like the one in the title sequence, as well as every gold cartridge he'd seen online. The last little man, if he could be called that, was actually like a little plastic figurine. It looked terrifying with its odd smile and almost human face. The figure was of Link, the game's character. Elliot's was beginning to feel uneasy. The mixture of no music and a strange green doll were starting to freak him out. He decided he'd better stop playing, but before he turned off the game, a text box popped up on screen, accompanied with a strange and creepy laughter. Elliot's looked at the controller. He hadn't pressed any buttons. The text was apparently speech from the man with the large pack. Elliot shuddered as he read it. "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" Elliot's almost jumped out of his skin as the character on screen spontaneously burst into flames, accompanied by a screeching yell that was psychologically damning, and instantly died. The words, "Game over," bled over the screen as it went black. Elliot took a deep breath to compose himself. His composure was short-lived as he heard the same laugh as before, and a new message popped up at the bottom of the screen. This time, Elliot felt like it was speaking directly to his soul, and his heart started to race. "You shouldn't have done that.